Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Synergetic Games. My name is Natalie, and today we are doing community story time from chapter 11. We've got quite a way through the book. I had a peek at how much longer we've got to go. I avoided spoilers. I was just checking how many chapters there were. Thank you for the hype. I think there's about 19. Will we get through all of them today? Probably not. Do I want to? Probably not. We're gonna go until I feel tired. Well, I say tired, I mean my voice, because I don't want to overdo it. But tell me, how was your day? How was everything? I wish to know. How are you guys? I'm gonna keep reading. You guys go ahead and you do you. I'm here to read, and I will do that. Make sure I got it. I do got a drink. I got my tea. I got my tea. Smaller than usual, but then I do have a second drink available to me in the form of tonic water. You can't really see it because I'm not waving the label at you, but there's a bottle there. But at the moment, I got me some number 22 Twinings, sort of chocolatey, molassesy goodness. It's a very good tea. I enjoy the tea. I'll have to go find some again, to be honest. It's good. But I've still got plenty of tea bags. It's kind of one of those things where oh, and it's kind of caramelly too. It's one of those drinks that actually, tastes what it says on the box. Does what it says on the tin, as it were. Because so many times you get these flavored teas and it's like, oh, this is, brewed in the lake of tears that tastes of bubblegum and sadness. But I don't know what bubblegum and sadness tastes like. Now, but you get so many flavored teas that just are like, well, I'm sure this should taste of something. It certainly smells like it should taste, but it just doesn't taste like it should taste. It just tastes like tea. Usually fruit tea. They taste about the same, yes. But this one, actually, it is nice, and it does taste of stuff. So there's that. Pardon me? I am... Okay, let's go. Chapter 11. She says, the next evening up at the camp, Harry had his first sight of Corporal Merman. Corporal Merman was sitting on his bed opposite Artie's. The sergeant slept in a little room at one end of the barrack called a bunk, and the two corporals slept at the other end to keep order, if anyone could be said to keep order. But Artie had been right. Corporal Merman did make a difference to the barrack room. Nobody was dancing on their bed in their shirt tails tonight. They were all just sitting talking, almost muttering, most of them with their backs to Corporal Merman. He was a tall, thin man with blonde, newly washed hair and a mouth as prim as a spinster's. His battle dress trousers seemed to be made of a finer, thinner material than anybody else's, and they had creases like knives. There was an ironing board in the space by his bed, and newly ironed shirts hung on hangers everywhere. Even his white braces seemed cleaner and neater than the other men's. His face was long and very pale, shiny almost as if a waxwork. He was polishing an already immaculate boot, but you could tell his large ears were busy listening. There were a few shouts of welcome for Harry, but they were a bit half-hearted. "Here's my favourite boy. Nip down to the Naffy for me, Harry," "What's this boy doing here?" asked Corporal Merman. "This is a military establishment. Civilians aren't allowed." His voice seemed thin and weak, but it carried. There was a silence. Then there were low boos and jeers from all the way up the barrack room, an angry sound. "Stuff it, Merman," said Artie. "Auntie? The kid does no harm. He goes to the Nafi for us." "And the dog," said Merman. "That's against King's regulations. Does the sergeant know about this? Corporal Blenkinsop. That is a mouthful of a name. I can't get over that." "He does, as a matter of fact, Corporal Merman." The bunk door had opened silently, and the massive figure of the sergeant stood there, his braces hanging around his legs, and a towel around his neck. "This dog and this kid are battery mascots, and very popular, unlike some I could mention, Corporal Merman." Corporal Merman swallowed and smiled, a thin, cold smile, as if he'd swallowed an acid drop whole. The sergeant turned to Harry. "Nip down to the Nafi for me, kid. An ounce of Players Uncut." Harry took everybody's order and left. When he got back, the atmosphere in the hut didn't seem any better. He gave out the things and changed. But all the time he felt Merman's cold eyes watching him. How could one man destroy the fun for so many? He didn't want to stay tonight. He wished Artie would ask him to go for a walk, but Artie was oddly quiet. In the end, the incoherent Scotsman suggested a game of football. Everybody played rougher than usual, and even Harry got one or two nasty kicks, though he was pretty sure they weren't meant. Merman kept watching out of the open window by his bed, with a superior sneer on his face. Finally, he yelled at Harry, Boy, come here!" Harry tried to ignore him as long as possible, but he wouldn't be ignored. The game stopped. Another silence fell. With everybody watching, Harry walked across to the window. "I want you to go to the Nafi for me, boy. I need a tube of toothpaste." "Fingers, come on." "He only goes down to the Nafi once. Once every night," somebody shouted. "Leave the kid alone," shouted somebody else. "He doesn't really need toothpaste. Just trying to spoil the kid's game of football." "Well, will you go or won't you?" said Merman. He looked at Harry with pale blue eyes. They reminded him of the eyes of a wolf he'd once seen at Edinburgh Zoo. He felt that if he went the errand for Merman, he'd somehow be in Merman's power. And that was the very last thing he wanted. He never wanted to go near Merman ever again. Merman made him want to shiver. "Gotta get home to me mum," said Harry, and walked away. "I'll remember that," said Merman. "Good night, kid," shouted the football players, and they went back to kicking the deflated football about miserably. The next day was Saturday. Harry went across to the barrack in the afternoon. As he approached the door, it seemed unusually quiet. But he walked in anyway, and then wished he hadn't. There was nobody there, except Corporal Merman sitting on his bunk. "Where's everybody?" Harry faltered. "Your friend Corporal Blenkinsop had to march them down to the airfield for a shower. It was his turn. What about you?" "Oh, I've had my shower. I have a shower every day. If I can. What do they say? Cleanliness is next to godliness." "Tell them I'll come back later." No. They've been gone for over an hour. They'll be back any minute." Come sit by me, boy. He patted the bed beside him. I'm expecting them back any minute. Harry hesitated. One part of him was yelling at him not to go near Merman at any cost. But another part, it was creepy. Wanted to make friends with Merman, get Merman on his side, so he didn't have to be afraid of him anymore. I've got a Mars bar here, said Merman. Like to share it with me? I know all you boys love Mars bars. That decided Harry, against his better judgment. He could never resist a gesture of friendship. Maybe the awful Corporal Merman was human after all. He sat down. Corporal Merman got the Mars bar out of his bedside locker, put it on top, unwrapped it neatly without tearing the wrapping paper, just folding it back like a bedsheet. Then he got out his very sharp, shiny clasp knife and cut it into 9 thin slices like a loaf of bread. He picked up the first piece, precisely between fingers. Between fingers and thumb. He held it up to Harry's mouth, feeding him like a baby. Ooh, this is creepy. I don't like this. Harry did not want to open his mouth, but he had to. He did not like the feel of Merman's fingertips on his lips. You're a big, strong lad, said Merman. You're very brown. I'll bet you have lots of girlfriends. No? Not any? Not ever? I would have thought you'd have had a girlfriend by your age. Aren't girls nice to squeeze? Stop being Oh, he's being so creepy. Why does he have to be so viciously unpleasant? I just thought he was going to be a square. Oh, I don't like this. Okay. Why do you have to say the word squeeze like that? It's italicized and everything. There's emphasis. It's gross. He put an arm round Harry's waist, found a fold of skin and nipped it very playfully. Harry wriggled violently and Merman let go and fed him another piece of Mars bar. I'll let you have fun with that dog of yours, though. Running about the beach, wrestling in the sand. I'll bet you have fun with that dog of yours. Ugh. Stop it. Every line is just so upsetting. Harry had a very nasty idea that Merman had been spying on him, when he hadn't realised Merman was there. And of course, you're a great friend of Corporal Blenkinsop's. You spend a lot of time together, don't you? Walks in the woods and along the cliffs. We do nature study, shouted Harry, suddenly furious for no reason he could quite work out. We watch birds and foxes. Yes, of course. Nature study, of course. You must take me to see all these birds and foxes some evening. He fed Harry a third bit of Mars bar, holding it so high that he forced Harry's head back. And you do other things with Corporal Blenkinsop? Like what? Harry wondered why he was getting so angry and flustered. I'm getting angry and flustered. We watch gannets, he added lamely after a silence. Of course, gannets. Just then there was a crunch of boots on the road outside, boots approaching at a trot, not a walk. Hup, 2, 3, hup, 2, 3, came Artie's urgent voice. Oh, this is so upsetting. Harry took a quick peep at Merman's face. The look on Merman's face was indescribable. All the men came barging into the barrack room, hitting each other with wet towels again. Hello, Corporal Merman. Fancy finding you here. Artie's eyes took in one glance, the two of them sitting on the bed, the sliced Mars bar. Coming for a walk, Harry? Harry came like a flash as they left. Artie shouted back at Merman. If they ever catch you at it, Merman, they won't just take away 2 little stripes. Your 2 little stripes. They'll put you away in Colchester for 5 bloody years. Oh my god. Gross. So gross. They walked along the road. The silence was heavy, like the dark grey sky. I don't like him, said Harry timidly. Quite right, son. Never go near him. When I realised what he might be up to, I couldn't get the lads back quick enough. They did the whole return journey at the double just for you. I hope you're on it. What is he up to? Never you mind, son. I wouldn't foul up your mind by telling you. Just stay away from him, right? Right. But nothing did seem to go right that afternoon. Harry could tell that Artie was very, very angry, and that seemed to frighten all the birds and animals away. Harry wakened on Sunday morning feeling blackly miserable. It wasn't just that it was pouring with rain outside, though that didn't help. He just felt all wrong. Jangled, jumbled up inside, and he couldn't tell what was wrong at all. Except it was about Merman. He could think of nothing but Merman. He tried to think about Artie, or the incoherent Scotsman, or the man who danced on the table on the end of his bed. But whatever he tried to think about, Merman kept sliding back into his mind. What did Merman want? He was like nobody Harry had ever met before. He was used to kind people like Artie. He was used to brutal people like the farmer with the shotgun. He had even met 1 or 2 people who were a bit nutty like Joseph, and selfish people who didn't give 2 damns about you. But Merman wasn't any of those. Merman wanted something of him, and he just didn't know what. It made him feel very unsafe. So unsafe and miserable that he just got the fire going, munched a miserable bit of breakfast and lay on, snug and warm inside his blanket. He cuddled Don a bit, and then Don got tired and mooched off for another walk. He heard footsteps coming along the path, leapt up, cursing himself for a careless idiot. The person passing would notice the smoke from the chimney and come and look in. After all his carefulness, his hiding place was discovered. Then he recognized the scrunch of the hobnailed boots. A soldier. It must be Artie, come to see what was the matter with him. Artie would listen to him, explain the odd way he felt. Artie would make things better. He looked up with an attempt at a grin as the doorway darkened. But it wasn't Artie. It was Corporal Merman. "There you are," said Merman. "Snug in your little nest." Harry couldn't think of anything to say to that. He just screwed up in a ball inside his blanket and stared at Merman, trying to read his face in the half-light. Merman was smiling. It wasn't a very nice smile. It was a sort of smirky, triumphant smile, pretending to be friendly. "Very comfy you've made yourself, you and Corporal Blenkinsop." Merman came and sat down next to him, as he had the other time. There was nothing that Harry could do about it. Merman was between him and the door. "I'll bet you have a lot of fun in here," said Merman. "With your nature studies." He sort of snickered to himself. "You don't come in here much," said Harry. "We go for walks." "Well, I don't suppose Corporal Blenkinsop minds where you go, as long as you're kind to him." Harry thought that it was a very strange thing to say. You weren't kind to adults. You liked them, or obeyed them. You weren't kind to them. "We're mates," he said at last. "Of course you are," said Merman. "Just as you and I are going to be mates." He put a cold, damp hand on Harry's bare arm. It was horrible, like touching a dead fish. I choose my own mate, said Harry, pulling his arm away. He blurted it out and then wished he hadn't. He didn't want to get Merman angry. He thought he might turn nasty. But he couldn't stand Merman hovering over him like that, touching him. Choosy, are we? Said Merman. He didn't seem annoyed, more excited. I wouldn't get too choosy if I was you. But you and your mate Corporal Blenkinsop might end up in a great deal of trouble with the police. Corporal Blenkinsop might end up going to prison. What we done? Squeaked Harry. His mind flew across all the things that he had done. Lying to the chip shop man, hitting the farmer, eating army grub, not having a license for Don. How could they send Artie to prison for things like that? But that doesn't have to happen, said Corporal Merman. Not if you're as kind to me as you've been to Corporal Blenkinsop. He took hold of Harry's arm and squeezed it again, a painful nick. This is so upsetting, oh my god. Harry went berserk. He pulled his arm away and tried to kick out at Merman, but the blankets hindered him, and Merman just edged out of the way, laughing. But it did knock the blankets wide, exposing Harry's legs and underpants, and Harry caught Merman's eyes drifting down to his underpants. And he pulled the blankets back around himself desperately. He suddenly got Merman's number. Merman was like the dirty boys at school, the ones who hung around the toilets and messed about with you when you went for a pee, poking you in the back while you were busy, and making you pee all over your shoes. What the frick, dude? Who does that to people? Or making remarks about you, or trying to grab your balls, which hurt like hell. Only they never went very far in the toilets, because there might always be somebody else coming in, who might run and tell tales to the teacher. He was alone with Merman. Well, nearly alone. Suddenly he was yelling for Don at the top of his voice. That won't do you any good, said Merman. You haven't got a license for that dog, have you? If I tell the police, they'll come and take your dog away. I don't think he's really your dog anyway. I think he's a stray, or you stole him. Harry heard Don bark on the beach, getting nearer, then silence. No sound of paws, no more barks, no Don. Hope died. Your dog's not coming, said Merman. He's got better things to do. Perhaps he's found a bitch in heat. Again, that smirk. Again, his hand reaching for Harry's arm. Come on, Merman wheedled. You've only got to be nice to me. It won't take long. I can bring you things. Sweets, Mars bars, things for your dog. I don't know what you mean, shouted Harry. Then the doorway darkened again. Don was standing there. Don was growling, a deep grumble that was half choked, because a hand was hooked tight around Don's collar. Artie's hand. Artie didn't look at Harry. He avoided Harry's look. He said to Merman, "Come outside, you filthy bastard. I'm going to give you a hiding and you won't forget. I'm going to give you a hiding you won't forget to your dying day." Harry could hardly recognize it was Artie. Artie looked hardly human. Merman tried to bluster. Merman's voice shook, but he tried to sound reasonable. "I'm not wanting anything you haven't done," he said. "You sneaking along to this kid morning and night. I saw you. I followed you there. You're crazy for the kid. You couldn't get enough of him." "Come out," said Artie in a dreadful voice. "Come out or I'll let this dog loose on you. And then I'll drag you out and deal with what the dog's left." No need to take it that way. We've both seen plenty of it in the army. Plenty of what? Artie turned to Harry. Have I ever touched you, Harry? I need to bandage me leg, said Harry. He turned to Merman. I sprained my ankle. He was looking after me. Something seemed to flicker out and die in Merman's eyes, leaving him looking pale and ill. All right, I was wrong, he said to Artie. How was I to know? Be reasonable. Harry felt a tiny flicker of sympathy for him. Only a tiny flicker, because he looked so lost. The next second, Artie had let go of the dog and grabbed Merman, and was dragging him out on his knees, out of the pillbox. The dog was barking wildly, and Artie was swearing like a man possessed. Harry was still trying to quieten Don when he heard the first blows. Harry didn't try to follow. He just sat, listening to the sounds of the fighting and Artie swearing, and remembering the lost look on Merman's face. Then he heard Merman screaming and sobbing, Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! Terror drove him out of the pillbox to see Merman on the ground, and Artie with a boot raised. Stop it, Artie! You'll kill him! There was a trickle of blood down Artie's face, from a cut lip, but Merman was writhing on the ground with his hands over his face, and his hands were red with blood. Harry flung himself at Artie, grabbed him round the legs, and shouted, Stop it! Stop it! At last Artie relaxed and stood still, just panting and slobbering. Then he licked the cut on his mouth and drew a hand across his face, and looked down at Harry and said, Hello, kid. It's you. His face still looked very strange. You could have killed him, said Harry. Artie sat down heavily on the grass. Maybe you're right. I wouldn't want to swing for that bugger. He's not worth it. He was still taking deep, shuddering breaths. Okay, good. I skipped a page. Here we go. Merman didn't hurt me, honest. He was just pestering me. I know, lad. I followed him from the camp, the dirty bastard. I saw him going along the cliff. Nobody walks along the cliffs in this weather. So I knew he was coming after you. I knew he'd spotted your hiding place. He must have seen me coming here when you were poorly with your leg. You mean, all the time he was talking to me, you were listening? Aye, I had to make sure what he was up to, the dirty bastard. I had to wait for him to show his hand. That's why I hung on to your dog. When you called him, I had to hear what he was saying to you. Why? Because he was jealous. It was a new creaky voice. They both turned and stared. Merman had hauled himself to his feet. His face was hideous, a mask of brown, drying blood. He was jealous, because he wants the same thing from you as me, only he was scared to ask for it. You filthy bastard. Artie leapt to his feet and made for Merman again, but Harry clung to Artie's legs and tripped Artie up, so he fell full length. And Merman went staggering off along the cliff top, like a drunken scarecrow. When he was at a safe distance, he turned and shouted, I'll get you for this, both of you! Then he staggered away, out of sight. They sat on a long time, staring at the sea, Artie dabbing at his cut mouth with a clean white handkerchief that slowly turned into a bouquet of bloodstains, getting fainter and fainter. Finally, Artie said, I'd never have touched you, Harry. You know that. Not like he thought. It's just his twisted mind. He thinks everybody is like he is. I know, said Harry miserably. You're a married man with a son my age. That doesn't mean much, said Artie bitterly. So is he. Feels sorry for his wife. Then he shrugged and said, we're sitting here like a couple of loonies getting ourselves soaked. Let's get out of the weather. They went back into the pillbox and Harry made up the fire. They tried to get the blood spots out of Artie's battle dress jacket, but they wouldn't come out. Will you get in trouble? Asked Harry. What, a corporal having a fight with a corporal? Happens all the time. In this man's army. It'll cost me for a new battle dress, that's all. Unless I can scrounge one from the quartermaster. But it's the end of a perfect friendship. Oh, Harry, you can't stay here. He can make trouble for you. Why? What have I done? Sleeping rough, stealing a dog. You've got to move on. Got to move on, son. He'll probably be on the phone to the police. The moment he gets himself cleaned up. Anonymous phone call, of course. No names, no pack drill. Look, you get packed up and get to that road over yonder. I'll walk back to camp and borrow a 30 weight and set you on your road. Where are you going? Where were you going when we first met? Holy Island? Lindisfarne? Lindisfarne? I'm sure we went through this last time, but Lindisfarne. Right, Lindisfarne it is, unless the tide's in. But the tide was in. Lindisfarne was an island cut off by a mile of sea, almost hidden, a grey, long, flat shadow in the teeming rain. I've got to get back to camp, said Artie. I'm on guard duty in an hour. And me kit's filthy. But I can't leave you out in this. He sat with his hands clenched around the steering wheel, chewing at his teeth, the lines deepening on his face. Harry knew he was in agony. Like a fox caught by its leg in a trap, and the trap was the army. If Artie wasn't on duty in an hour, he'd be in real trouble. Lose his stripes, maybe get sent to the glass house. He must let Artie out of the trap. It was the one good thing to do, although it felt like stepping off the edge of the world. He said, gently, trying to keep the tremor out of his voice, "Find me a thick hawthorn hedge, under a tree. That'll keep me dry." Artie looked at him. His eyes were grateful and very ashamed. "You're a good kid. I wish I could take you home to my missus. She'd look after you, this bloody awful war." They had to drive around quite a lot to find a hawthorn hedge with a tree. But they found one at last, and Artie lifted down all his kit, gave Don a last rough, desperate pat, shook hands and drove away without looking back. It was only after the truck had vanished that Harry realised he had something pressed into his right hand. After Artie's last handshake, a little wad of dirty paper. He opened it up and saw 3 very oily pound notes. He heard again Artie's last desperate words. "Keep in touch, son. Let me know you're getting on all right." £3. That was a whole week's wages for Artie. More. How would he afford his fags now? And Harry didn't even need the money. He had plenty of money. When he got settled again, he would write to Artie and send the money back. Meanwhile, he was getting wet, with no means of getting dry again. That was the only thing that made sense at the moment. I have to take these off. I don't know why I have them on except to listen to sound alerts, but I'm not actually even doing anything with them. Pardon me. Harry forced his way into the hedge. It was quite dry in there. Lots of dry leaf mould with only a few prickles. He curled up tight with Don, smelling the doggy smell of him for comfort, driving his face into Don's fur to block the world out. And he slept, a queer, jerky sleep full of dreams that switched from one scene to another. Sometimes he was sea-calling on the beach with Joseph. Sometimes he was walking through the woods with Artie. Sometimes back at his own house, staring at the little blue flames, licking up the bricks that had once been home. And sometimes on the beach before the war, building sand castles. But always, Merman was somewhere about. Merman with his bleeding face, wanting. Then he would jolt awake and see the dull grey sky showing through the dark green hawthorn leaves, and hear the endless sound of the rain, and know that Merman was far away. Like everything else, everything was far away, except the world, which was a big black cold hole now, reaching in with icy fingers to steal his very life. Then he would bury his face in Dom's warm fur and sleep again. It was the sunset that woke him, shining in through the leaves, a magnificent sunset. It had stopped raining, and the pilot's watch said 4 hours had passed, 6 o'clock. Above his head, the hedge and the big tree were dripping right onto his head. They had kept him dry till now, but they were going to make him very wet if he stayed much longer. Nothing for it but to get on the move again, and he was ravenous. He stumped along, head down, not wanting to look at the world. Don ran ahead, full of life, questing for food without a care in the world. Once again, Harry wished he was a dog. Chapter 13? Chapter 13? I swear we were just reading chapter 11. When did we get to chapter 13? I'm confused. I'm going back until I find chapter 13. Oh, there's chapter 12. Okay, fine. We didn't just miraculously skip a chapter. We're good. Okay, chapter 13. He walked up the rain-soaked roads towards the sunset, which was a very lovely lemon yellow, and turning the road lemon yellow too. So he seemed to walk on the light on the sky. It lifted him a little above the dense mass of misery about Artie. While the sunset lasted, he felt he could keep going, could almost fly above his troubles. But he knew that when the dark came, he'd plunge deep, deep back into them. Keep walking away from them. Around him, the fields were empty, but there was a house ahead, where the road met the sky, a house with 2 chimneys smoking. They must be rich to have 2 fires going at once in wartime. He imagined a table laid for supper, with cloth serviettes and heavy silver knives and forks, like they had in Carrick's Cafe in Newcastle. Pork pie and chips, big fat Carrick's chips. The thought was a mistake. His belly filled up suddenly with the fuzzy liquid of hunger. But he went on with his fantasy about the house. It was the house of somebody he knew. They were waiting for him to come home. Oddly enough, at that point, and he was still 100 yards away, the figure of a woman came out of the garden gate and stood in the road, watching. "Hi, Starbreeze, how are you?" I don't know how long you've been here, but you just missed a really disturbing couple chapters, so good on you. It was so upsetting. The VOD will be up by the end of the stream if you want to check it out, but oh my god. It's going to be a whole thing. It's a whole thing. Only she was in silhouette against the sunset, and he couldn't tell if she was staring at him or away from him. But he could tell from the way her elbows stuck out that her hands were clasped tight together. She was waiting for somebody, and anxious as well. He still had the absurd idea that she was waiting for him, but it must be somebody out of sight, beyond the brow of the hill. But there was no one on the road behind him. He checked. Then he got nearer. He saw she was looking at him. She had come down the road 10 paces toward him. She gestured to him, as if urging him on. Again he looked behind him, but there was nobody. She shouted something urgent, which he couldn't make out. Unable to bear the suspense, he broke into a feeble trot, all the weight of the pack and the pans on his back banging away. How are you, Starbreeze? Tell me about your day. As he neared her, she reached out and grabbed both his hands. Hi, Gray. He looked bewildered at her middle-aged, bespectacled face. He didn't know her from Adam. She was a total stranger. She was yelling at him urgently. My mother's fallen on the stairs, and I can't lift her. Come quick and help me lift her. If she hadn't been holding his hands, he might well have run away. He was scared of old age and illness. He had enough troubles of his own. But the woman had a firm grip on him, so he went. Up the crazy paving path, with huge white conch shells lined up on both sides, dreading what he might see. When his eyes got used to the dark hallway, a massive bulk at the foot of the stair, a fat grey-clad legs sprawled. Any old house, skirts right up above the knees, a clutter of sprawled arms and knobbly sticks, and a face. The face smiled up at him. There's a kind lad, the old lady said. It was a headmistressy sort of face, with white hair piled high and gold-rimmed spectacles perched on the nose, and dangling a gold chain. He knew in an instant this was no useless old granny. This was somebody far too important to be left lying in a heap at the bottom of the stairs. If you'll take this hand, said the old lady, as calm and decisive as Field Marshal Montgomery. Ada can manage the other. Now, both heave together and stop flapping, Ada. I'm not dead yet. I'm doing well, Starbreeze. I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. Hi, Gray. How are you? Tell me about, your secrets. I love those. Tell me about them. There was one tremendous heave, and she was on her feet, her spectacles wildly array. She adjusted them and said, Sticks! Ada grovelled behind her and produced the sticks. The old lady settled her grip on them both, nodded to Harry, as if to say all was well, and said, Come in, young man, and led the way in stately fashion. The room was large and cosy, with a blazing fire and bookshelves all over the walls. But what caught his eye was the table laid for supper, with big fat silver knives and forks, just like at Garrick's Cafe. You drove your housemate to go and scrap a car. Ooh, nice. And put some paper through a letterbox. And played lots of Minecraft. That's nice. That's nice. Done. The end. What do you mean put paper through a letterbox? Is that your job? Because, if so, fine. But just a bit more clarification on that. Please do elaborate. What do you mean paper through a letterbox? Are you a postman? Is that your occupation? I'm sure you've said what it is at some point, but I just don't remember. Or did you have some of your neighbor's post and you just put it through the thing? Or do you have a paper route that I don't know about? Or I don't know. I require clarification. Please give it to me. You'll stay for a bite, of course. Take his bags upstairs, Ada. And set another place. We must look after our rescuer. Do sit down, master. I'm afraid I didn't catch your name. Harry. Bagley. He shook hands solemnly. I expect you would like to wash your hands, Master Bagley. Show him the bathroom, Ada. Nice. It is nice. The bathroom smelt fragrant and female, like their bathroom at home after Mum had a bath. Only much more so. He was almost afraid to use the pale pink towel, in case he left a dirty mark on it. He washed his face and hands 3 times, then dried them on his filthy handkerchief. But he borrowed the large pink comb and combed his hair, and carefully checked his hairs afterwards, and pulled the hairs out of the comb, and put them in his pocket to throw away later. Then he grew afraid that he'd made a small dirty mark on the pale pink carpet, and spent 3 minutes trying to scrub that out with his hanky and spit. He hovered on the landing, suddenly terribly shy, but the old lady's head appeared, and she said, "Ah, there you are." And then he had to go downstairs. "Do sit here. I expect you're ready for supper. I see you've been camping. You haven't had very good weather for the first week of your holiday." "No, it's been a bit wet." He realized how posh her voice was against his own, even though he was talking to her the proper way he talked to the teachers at school. "Camping by the sea?" He followed her eyes. There was a small pile of sand on her carpet, where his bag had rested for a moment. His mouth fell open with embarrassment, but she just said, "I've loved the sea all my life, since I was a young gal." "Since I was a young gal?" I used to swim every day, 3 times a day, when I could. My father used to call me the mermaid. He thought she didn't look much like a mermaid now. She said, "I don't look much like a mermaid now, do I?" and roared with laughter. Then she said, "Tell me all the things you've been up to. Your dog's quite snug in the kitchen, by the way." Ada found a ham bone for him with a bit of meat on. He used to be the treasurer for a group, but someone else is doing it now. My address is still the postal address for the account, so I was posting 2 years of statements through their door. Oh, okay, cool, nice. I hope they've changed the address now. I hope they've done that at least. That's going to be a pain if that keeps happening. So we told her all about Joseph, while Ada bustled in with plates of sliced ham and tomato, and a stand full of scones and a large sponge cake. By the end of tea, his belt felt very tight. He knew he had made a pig of himself, but she kept on urging him on with a kind of glee. I know what appetites young men like you have. Halfway through tea, the sunset had faded, and it had begun to rain, a heavy, hopeless rain that battered at the windows. When he had refused a fourth piece of cake, the old lady pushed back her chair, grasped her sticks, and said, "Not a night for camping out, I'm afraid. Come and sit by the fire." Then, when he had sat, she said, "Ada, make up a bed for the young man in young David's room." And that was that. He might as well have been kidnapped and chained up for all the chance he had of getting away that night. But he didn't seem to mind. He was full, he was warm, and he had lost any desire to go anywhere. A great calm had descended on him, until Ada returned and said, "What about pyjamas?" "Lay out a pair of David's. I'm sure the boys don't wear pyjamas when they're camping." And lay out David's dressing gown and slippers. She looked at Harry's startled face. "David won't mind. Much too busy hunting U-boats off Bermuda and getting off with local girls." I have no doubt. It's more complicated than that. The bank is a running joke with just when you try and update the address, but the other's worry is it might start charging if we stick our heads above the parapet. Oh yeah, okay. Well, I wish I could offer you advice, but I don't know anything about banks. All I know is NatWest, which is my bank, is generally well behaved. I don't know about yours, or the one that your group was using. It depends, really. Gosh, I couldn't tell you. I have zero advice to give you, and for that I am sorry. But I am not the person to go to for any sort of banking advice. Yeah, that's true. You're not the treasurer anymore. But it's still a bit of a pain to get your papers constantly posting letters and things to other people. It's just annoying. Or it would annoy me anyway. Pardon me. She smiled conspiratorially, and he smiled back. She said, "It's nice having a boy around the house again. Though why nice boys turn into boring middle-aged men, I have no idea. Tell me about your school." It was a long, cozy evening. She was a good listener, and he talked more than he had done for years, about making a model yacht and sailing it with Dad, about bullying at school. It was hard to keep off the things he didn't want her to know. The dark bits, the last bombing, the fight between Artie and Corporal Merman. They hardly saw Ada at all. First she was washing up in the kitchen, then she was making up the beds upstairs, then she was fetching supper drinks. "The dog dry yet?" "Good." Boys always like to go to bed with their dogs. "Just take him a walk around the garden first, Ada. It stopped raining. We don't want any doggy accidents, do we, Harry?" Then she talked on herself. About before the war, about the weekend parties, and the housefuls of young men, and the horses and the sailing boats, and sailing out into the ferns and having picnics with the gulls wheeling overhead, catching titbits on the wind. How fascinating she was. He'd never realized how fascinating an old person could be. Not like the dull middle-aged Ada, who seemed to do nothing but work and ask what was next to be done. It was midnight before the party broke up, and it was the grandfather clock striking 12 that did it. "I must go to bed," she said, "like Cinderella." He stood up, the spell broken. "Give me a good night kiss, Harry," she said. I might be 60, but I still enjoy being kissed by handsome young men. But it was the silent Ada who showed him up to his room, where the sheets were turned down and the pajamas laid out. Pajamas that were far too big for him. "Will you be all right getting her upstairs?" asked Harry worriedly. "She's better at going up," said Ada shortly. "Good night." He had to roll the sleeves of the pajamas up, or they'd have been unbearable. But he and Dawn slept soundly, with the scent of lavender sheets filling the room. In the morning, Ada wakened him with a cup of tea. "Breakfast will be ready in half an hour." The table was laid for one. "Where's—" "In bed," said Ada shortly. "And will be for the next 3 days. That's if she's lucky. She overdid things last night. She always does when she hasn't a man around the house. She's always liked the men." "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. You did her a lot of good, really. She doesn't see much of life now." "David, all the others?" "Too busy with the war. We've not seen anybody but the postman for months. When they're not fighting, they're living it up in London. I don't blame them, really. They need their relaxation. But they don't know how bad she is. And she'll not let me write and tell them. Proud she is. She'll not have their pity. Not when she could always wrap them around her little finger when she was younger. That's her, when she was young." She showed him a photograph from the mantelpiece in a silver frame. The young girl was laughing, eyes full of mischief, wearing a white sailor dress and holding the hand of a man in a blazer and white flannels. They looked very happy together. "Is that her husband?" "No, just one of her young men. She had so many young men. They took her sailing, fox hunting, up in airplanes later on. She was always one for a dare. She took part in the London-Paris air race when she was 44, climbed Mount Blanc when she was 48, with a young man half her age." "And what about you?" "I was never one for that sort of thing. But you, Master Harry, you're the last of a long line." "Can't I say goodbye?" "She wouldn't like you seeing her as she is now. Go on, eat your breakfast and get off, wherever you're going." She came to the gate to see him off with a pack of fresh-made sandwiches. "Can I come back again?" "You can try. Don't leave it too long." And that is chapter 14. I think I'm going to leave it there for now. We did do good. Do it in 2-year stints. Okay. So we'll see. Maybe you'll become treasurer again in the future. But I think today we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for being here. We will continue on with the story next week. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. The first half of that read was not great. I say not great, but it was fascinating. But I am going to leave you here. And I will see you again on Monday for Final Fantasy VIII, where we will be fighting the brothers, if you recall. And hopefully not sucking at it. So I will see you on Monday. Have a great rest of your weekend. Sleep well when you go. If it is not your bedtime, have a great time zone. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye, guys.